we're about to cut all your hair off. So all of that is going to go bye-bye. Does it make you nervous?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, perfect. That's just the beginning.
I'm Laurie Lupke, and I'm from Vancouver, Washington.
So tell me about your hair, Laurie. What's going on?
Well, it's very straight, long, thinning, gray, and it just keeps getting thinner.
What bothers you most about your hair right now? Okay, now before we get to Laurie's answer, that question might have sounded very similar to the last question I just asked. Here's a pro tip for you. I like to ask a very similar question over and over because many times I get slightly different answers, and those different answers give me different insights into what the client is actually wanting. So for you, when you go to the salon, make sure that if your stylist isn't asking you a lot of questions, that you really kind of over-explain the answers that you give, because you never know what answer or what key piece of information you're going to give them. That might be the light bulb moment that changes everything or much of what you do with the cut. We're going to learn more about that here pretty soon.
Well, I hate my cowlick. Like, I just can't ever really have bangs and let your hair dry by itself because it's just not going to lay flat.
Okay.
But other than that, I mean, I don't mind the color because
You have beautiful color. I love your color.
Thank you.
Okay, the question that you're about to hear me ask, Laurie, is probably one of the most valuable pieces of information that you can give to your stylist. And I find that actually a lot of stylists don't ask this question. Now, giving out this kind of information may feel a little bit conceited, but it's so important to truly getting the right hairstyle for you specifically. When you look at yourself in the mirror, like, what is your favorite thing about your facial features?
I don't know. I guess my eyes.
Yes, you have beautiful eyes. Your hair color is, like we said before, is incredible. I think you have amazing cheekbones. Like, one of the first things I saw was cheek structure.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you feel at all self-conscious about that you maybe want to draw less attention to?
Just like my cowlick and my forehead.
Tell me where you're heading. What's going on?
We'll be hiking the PCT, so off grid.
How long is this going to take?
About 6 months.
All right, now, if you're unfamiliar, the PCT is actually the Pacific Coast Trail, which runs all the way from Canada down to Mexico. It's a very intense hiking trail. You're going to be on trails in the middle of nowhere for 6 months.
Yeah.
That's interesting, though. That brings up a lot in terms of the haircut, because you do need something that's very easy to manage.
I mean, I'd like to somewhat look decent, but
okay.
I realized, that I'm not gonna be able to wash my hair, for days on end. So
because you're not gonna be able to really manage it or wash it, then you're probably gonna be putting it back a lot, I'm assuming. Am I incorrect in that?
I'd like to at least maybe be able to pin the front back.
Okay.
Also wear a scrub cap for work, so I need to be able to at least keep it in my scrub cap.
Okay, and this is where the video took an entire left turn. So let me share a little bit of behind the scenes with you if I can. Before we do these makeovers, Deanna and myself, or both of us, typically jump on a Zoom call with the client because we need to kind of get an idea for what direction they're wanting to head or where we're going to take the video. Now, I knew that Laurie was going to hike the Pacific Coast Trail, and that started to work into ideas of what we would do with her hair that would make a lot of sense. So I planned around that. What I didn't plan for was what Laurie was about to share. Have you considered, or do you have any ideas as far as what you like to see with your hair right now? Or like,
I would definitely go shorter, at least shoulder, like maybe even chin length. I'd like to be able to at least pin it back out of my face.
Wow, okay. I did not expect that. I originally, coming into this, was thinking that we were going to be leaving this longer.
Oh no.
Didn't realize that there was option to be going into much shorter.
Oh yeah.
So as long as you can get the front back and get this back up and off of the neck, that's kind of your biggest concern. So a very short ponytail would suffice.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the front part? If they didn't all come back into one ponytail, but they could tuck behind the ears, would that be an option or no? The things that we need to know, or that we need to pay attention to, are that you need something that is going to be easy to manage, because you're not going to be managing it. Now, that's actually why a bob shape would function really well for you, so I'm very glad that you're open to it. Bobs have a tendency to, even when they dry, and this is probably why you lend yourself towards a bob anyway, why you liked them, when they dry, that you don't need to style them a bunch to get the look of a bob. And the look of a bob comes with certain things that are that are advantageous, right? It's based on a very strong line. It's based on a certain shape that it just kind of does. And regardless of how you style it, really all you're doing with the bob when you style it is you should be, if it's cut correctly, just polishing off what's already there. So bobs are just a little bit easier for that. So for your trail, done deal. Like, it's 100% probably the direction that I would try to lean you towards if you weren't willing to do it. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you're willing just makes that a whole lot easier for me. Regardless of all of that, let's cut your hair off. So start there. That's just the beginning. Okay, so at this point in the day, I knew this was a very different video than what I had anticipated doing in the morning. But I also knew that I could share some really good insight with you as to common mistakes that happen with bob shapes and hopefully how you could avoid them happening to you. And we'll do that in a second. But if I can be completely a little bit, I guess, vulnerable with you for a sec. In situations like this, while I'm very confident in my technique with cutting the bob, I was still very nervous about how Laurie would react to taking this much length off right before she leaves for a really big trip. With all that said, here's the first big mistake that I see happen all the time when it comes to bobs. One of the things we talk about with bobs is you want to make sure that side is really strong. So not only is it strong, which means that it shouldn't have this little hiccup, which a little like area that comes up right around the ear, or look too thin. And one of the ways that we kind of get around that, or that we save ourselves from having that problem, at least with the little hiccup, is when you comb over the ear part, you actually kind of either, they have different ways of doing it, but they'll tap it a lot of times, or they might just hold this part right in the comb and not actually like place it. So this might be pressed against your skin. And then over the ear, you just want to leave a little bit more slack there. Because if I comb this down and press that against your skin too, because your hair is now being brushed over this ear, it's going to pop up a little bit and you're going to get this little bit of a hiccup right there. It's a little bit A. So it's just something really to kind of keep in mind if you are getting a bob cut, just to think about. Like, you do want to make sure that there is a little bit of looseness in here so that you give yourself a little bit of room so that worst case scenario, it's a little bit long. It's something that I never talk about when it comes to bob shapes, but it's actually super important. And then when we get into the actual layering process and how we layer this, I'll show you how to make sure that you don't over layer it. Okay, now have you ever had a bob shape that just felt like it was way too layered, very thin at the bottom, or that the top layers just seemed, I guess, a little bit off? Here's probably why that happened, and here's how you can avoid it. Okay, so to determine how to get these layers the right length, right, to make sure that we're not gonna get them too short, all I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to take your hair right here. I'm gonna take this section back here. You've got this occipital bone, we all do, right? Right back here, and this is where your head dips in, okay, right in the nape. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick this hair up, and I'm gonna use that occipital bone as kind of a guide. My number one thing is just to make sure that anything around the occipital bone here doesn't end up with the top layers being shorter than that. But in this case, we're just gonna make sure that we leave those a little bit longer because I don't want it to be overly layered. But I do want some layers because if I don't put any layers on here, I'm not taking any of the bulk out of there. Now, the good thing though is when I come over through here, I'm gonna lift this straight up. And when I lift this straight up to cut it, what that means is that all of this hair is gonna fall out of that section. I mean, it's not gonna reach up. I'm trying to cut this length. This stuff doesn't reach up above that to get cut. That means that all of this stuff basically stays one length, right? And therefore I know that even though I'm layering this, I'm still gonna have this strong line down there. If I go too much and pull this out down here and layer this up, now I'm putting more layering through here, and that means this is gonna get thinner and thinner and thinner, especially around the ear. There's so few hair follicles by comparison in this little section right here than there are back here in this big thick section back here, right? So if I layer this hair the same way I layer back here, this down through here over the ear is gonna look much thinner. All right, now I know that that might sound pretty technical, but here's how you actually use that information to avoid this mistake. You can actually pin your hair up just where I showed you, take the top out of the way, get it pinned out of the way, and then look at the bottom. And that's gonna be a good indication of how thick that bottom line is gonna be. There's very rare cases where you just have a hair texture that can't handle any sort of layering down there. And so when you pin that hair out of the way, that stuff on the sides might already look too thin. In your scenario, you should leave the sides a little bit more one length, but otherwise this is gonna give you a good insight into how layered or how thin those bottoms would look. And you might find that while you were concerned about layers, it actually works really well for you and you shouldn't be concerned at all. You can also do this at the salon where you actually pin that hair up. And if you're concerned about this being over layered, just have a conversation with your stylist and say, I've had this side stuff layered a little bit too much in the past and it started to look a little bit thin. When I pull this hair out of my way, this area down here doesn't look too thin. Can we just ensure that that doesn't get layered any more than it absolutely has to, because I don't want it to look thinner than it does now. And that hopefully will help your stylist to understand what you're looking for and not overlay your hair, and you'll end up with a strong line like you should have for that bob. I want some pieces in the front that are shorter, kind of like a bang, but to break like right at your cheekbone structure. And it just brings a little bit more emphasis to cheekbones too, just having them land about that area, right?
Okay.
But with yours specifically, a lot of times what we would do is we'd actually take those and we would layer them into the length, so we would connect them. So you'd have all of the quote unquote face framing layers that come in, but you wear them off, you wouldn't really want to see it. On yours, I'm actually not going to connect it. I want to do something a little bit different, and they're going to be just pieces that are angled but not fully connected into the length. That's actually a cool look, actually not having any connection there, just having some kind of stronger pieces.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Now, the other reason that I wanted to go in this direction for the front pieces on Laurie's hair is because if she does pull her hair back and those tend to fall and it drives her absolutely crazy, I didn't want to have too much going on in the front that she had to deal with. So this way, it still gave us a little bit of accentuation of cheekbones, but it wasn't so dramatic that it would be a total nightmare if she didn't like it once she got out on the trail. Now, also, before we move on, there's a very important secret that people have to know, and this really actually goes for most any haircut, but especially when it comes to bobs. It's not uncommon to have a client come in and be in a rush or need to get out of the salon ASAP and just say, hey, you know what, I'm good with leaving my hair wet. Please, if you can avoid it, never do this. There are many situations, a bob is one of them, where much of the haircut that really makes the bob look good is actually done dry. And it's not that it can be done dry, it's that it needs to be done dry. And so in just a second, I'm going to show you a little bit of that. We're also going to get into what made Laurie absolutely the most nervous of this entire situation. Okay, now that we've had her hair dry, you can kind of see that there's a lot going on that we need to address a little bit. Now, I'm going to actually let you tell us, what texture hair do you have?
Fine.
Fine hair. And I'm going to texturize it, even though it's fine. That's like a cuss word, I feel like, for fine hair. Does it make you nervous?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I didn't know that. This is great. Why?
Usually in the past, people try and do that. It's just a mess.
And how is it a mess? What happens?
It just looks choppy and goes everywhere.
Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to texturize hair, and this is one of the reasons I constantly tell people, don't go to a stylist and start using terms that you heard another stylist use. It could be vastly different things. For instance, layering. Layering is literally if your hair is all one length and a piece of your hair is not as long as the rest of it, it's technically layered. But it's very different than your hair being overly layered, right? Or really layered. So there's just a ton of different ways to say something. And if you just go in and say, for instance, I want it texturized, texturizing is done 1,000 different ways. So the idea of being concerned of texturing or thinning or anything like that is 100% valid. So it's not that you're invalid with your fear. It's that it's not a texturizing or thinning problem. It's a process fault problem. It's the way that it was approached that created the problems, not the technique itself. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I've just texturized the back of your hair. Now you can't see this, but so when I comb this down, you see how all of this in here looks like you can't see layering in there. But when I do this, there's a lot of layering in there. That layering is important because it's what's creating this bevel at the bottom. So when we go to the side here a little bit more, when I can get you to a profile. Now, can you still see it?
Yeah.
See how this lays in? Okay, that texturizing and that layering is what creates that. Without this, I can't get that same look. It's gonna be a lot more fold through here. So I need to texturize this to get the right look. And when it's done correctly, it doesn't have the choppiness or the concerns that you're thinking of. It had nothing to do with it being textured. It had everything to do with the way in which it was textured. And that's what this is why I showed stuff like this, because I think it's really important. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients come in that are new that rightfully are concerned about doing something. They'll say, I don't want any thinning. And the problem is I go, okay, well, we can do that, but that's limiting more than it's benefiting. I understand your concern. I know where you're coming from, but here's why we can actually benefit from doing texturizing. And if they still end up saying, no, I just don't feel comfortable with it, cool, we won't do it. That's your call. But now you understand the difference in why it's important and what you miss. It's many times it's been in a situation where I'm like, I'm giving you like 80% of the haircut I can give you. I can do so much better than I'm doing, but my hands are so tied that I can't do what I need to do, right?
Sure.
And this is probably why you've had a problem with it. Lighter hair tends to show anything going wrong, any choppiness, you're gonna see it, right? So the lighter your hair gets, the more dramatic this is gonna become. But also, because of that, it's the reason that it needs to be texturized or thinned, right? So it's kind of a catch-22. It's the exact thing that is the problem in your scenario, but also it's the best solution for the problem in your scenario. All right, so we're almost done with the cut. But we did have one more surprise for Laurie. And that is that our amazing friend Megan came over to do makeup for us. Now, Megan actually owns a place called the Glam Beauty Bar that's in Vancouver. So if you're around the Portland, Vancouver area, definitely go check her out. But she's also been featured multiple times on AM Northwest, which is a local television show around the area. And she's incredible at what she does. She had some really good tips for Laurie, who doesn't actually like to wear a lot of makeup. So now that Megan has done amazing makeup on you, and you now have a slightly shorter haircut, are you ready to finally see it?
So good.
You can feel it. Are you ready to see it?
Yeah.
Okay, and so
Wow.
there you go.
Oh my gosh.
Do you like it?
I love it.
You look amazing.
It looks so good.
It looks
That kind of-
awesome.
Makes some care.
I love it. Yes, the makeup looks great. Like natural.
like yourself. Just
Yes.
yeah.
So I wanted to keep it in a natural vein. I didn't want her to feel like she had a bunch of clown makeup on. So we stayed with a really luminous foundation that still looked like her skin. I used a bronzing technique that was also liquid so that everything's just sort of like feels like skin. And we spritzed with a nice moisturizing, like hydrating spray ahead of time. So that keeps things looking less cakey. I wanted to just barely accentuate her brows so that framed everything out. But it didn't feel like she had painted on eyebrows.
Yeah.
And then lipstick is the easiest way to look like you tried hard. It's the best, quickest technique. And then we decided we love a gloss. So then it just brightens everything up, a little pop of blush. And those eyes are just gorgeous as is. So I just did a little something on there so that they felt complete, but not like 18 layers of
Do you love it?
I love it.
It doesn't feel like you have a ton of makeup on.
No.
It feels very natural.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was the whole goal. As a young makeup artist, I like to put all the makeup on, and now I like to listen to people and be like, "What makes you feel good?" Because that's what this whole thing's about.
Just so you know, like what we did with the cut, if you turn it aside here, it was pretty specific. We talked a lot about the whole idea of texturizing and layering and everything, but you're going to be gone, right? So you're going to be away. You need something that, even if you don't style it, it's still going to function and look like you did style it. So taking the layers right in here and actually texturizing the bulk out of this area allows that to lay in, but more importantly, it accentuates this angle without having to go more of a dramatic angle. And the benefit to that is that it still follows this jaw structure. It follows the incredible cheekbones that you naturally have, that you accentuated exceptionally well. It follows nice, all that stuff goes up here so that even if you don't do much to it, which flat ironing it doesn't do a lot to it. So we flat ironed your hair. Obviously, it's not giving it a ton of volume. It's really reliant on the beveling and the shape being cut into it. And this is how we know that when you're gone and you don't spend a lot of time on it, it's still going to function well for you. So you have movement. You use some couple little pieces here just to kind of break there, just so that when you bring it back, it opens it up a little bit. Here's the biggest reason I did those. It's not so much to be able to see when you're wearing a bob, okay? I did that so that when you do pull this back, which you're probably going to do a lot, it still is just a few pieces that they could fall and give you kind of a different look, right? A little bit more of a point of interest here so it's not all back, but also fine enough, light enough that you can still tuck this back when you pull it back even and get that to stay back, and it's not going to drive you totally insane. And you still have just enough length to pull this into your little ponytail back here. I mean, it's a nub. I'm not going to lie, it's a nub, but
It works though.
but there we go. You love it?
I love it.
You know what we always say at the end of these?
This view doesn't suck.
I'm tough. I didn't know if you knew. You didn't know that yet, but you look great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you, Megan, for being here. If you want to learn more about Megan or where she's doing or what she's doing and where she's at, especially if you're in the Portland, Vancouver area, I'm going to go ahead and make sure to leave links in the description as well as the pinned comment so you can find her. And also, all of the makeup products that Megan used today are also going to be linked down there so you can find them as well. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
It looks awesome.
Thank you.
Good all around.
I was just going to see if we can make it awkward.